Hello. In today's video, I want to talk to you about the importance of language. Why? Because an awful lot of the therapies that I teach involve me talking, using words to give you ideas and images that I hope will help you. But those ideas and images may not help you if your association with a particular word is totally different to mine. What's she going on about? Let's talk about phobias. If someone has, for example, a phobia about dogs, seeing a dog will provoke an extreme reaction in them. If it's a really bad phobia, just hearing the word dog or seeing a picture of a dog will provoke the same extreme reaction. Because the bottom line is, your mind cannot tell the difference between a real threat, i.e. a real physical dog, or an imaginary threat, the word or a picture of a dog. Your mind will react in the same way, sending your body into fight, flight or freeze mode. In other words, making you feel absolutely dire. The words that we use can have different meanings for other people. And hands up, all of you who have had problems and had stress caused because of communication problems with somebody, where all unknowingly you are saying one thing and the other person is interpreting it in a completely different way. It's not what you meant at all. And I think one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given about communication was given to me years ago by someone who specialises in communication, who said, don't think about what you want to say, think about what you want the people or person listening to hear. And what I want you all to hear is that the words you use to others and the words you use to yourselves need to be chosen with care. Now it's fairly, it's fairly obvious why words you use to others need to be chosen with care. You need to make sure that the other person is understanding what you're saying. But we all talk to ourselves. We all have this little running voice in our head that's telling us things all the time. And the sad thing is that so often the things our subconscious telling us are not true. You know, we're not useless. We don't fail at everything. But when you make a mistake, that's what your subconscious tends to come out with. Oh, you're rubbish. You fail at anything, you're never going to get anything right. You can't pass exams. You're never going to have a girlfriend. All these sorts of things. Pick your own favourite phrase and put it in there. I'm sure you've got one. I know I have. So words have a profound effect. Now, the words that you say to other people need thought. And there is that saying, engage brain before operating mouth. Don't make a quick reaction if someone says something that upsets you. Take a deep breath and then maybe think if you are misunderstanding what they're saying, because it is quite possible. And so instead of reacting angrily, maybe just ask them, well, hang on a minute, why do you say that? because I don't think it's true. What am I doing that makes you think that? One of the biggest pieces of advice I can ever give anyone in a relationship is to remember that communication is two-way. Yeah, it's easy to talk and communicate. It's much harder to listen. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase, are you listening or are you just waiting for your turn to speak? And so often when someone's talking to us, we're not really listening, we're not really taking it in. And one of the things that mindfulness encourages you to do is to really be present in conversations. So you're really listening, so you might understand maybe some of the nuances that you might not get if half of your mind was elsewhere. So the words that I choose when I lead meditations or when I'm doing hypnotherapy with someone are absolutely crucial. If I know somebody has got an allergy to something, then I need to make sure that whatever visualization I use to take them into a trance, I don't accidentally put them in a position where their mind might perceive that the thing they're allergic to is there. You know, there's absolutely no point in telling someone who's got really bad hay fever and to grass pollen to ask them to imagine walking through a flower-filled meadow in the spring. It's just going to trigger their allergy. So, in fact, when I'm working one-to-one with someone with hypnotherapy or indeed with mindfulness, unless I'm doing something very generic, I will ask about allergies and phobias because I don't want to accidentally trigger something. So the words that I use when I'm doing therapy, I have to choose carefully. How much more carefully do you need to choose your words when you're talking to other people or talking to yourself? We all have this little voice that's jabbering at us in our heads. It never gives up. And the thing is, that little voice is normally not saying very complimentary things. It's normally telling us we're stupid, we made a stupid mistake, we're never going to be any good at anything, we're hopeless, we're never going to lose weight, we're never going to learn to play that instrument. Put your own favourite hassle point in there. I'm sure you've got one that you find yourself often saying to yourself. And when somebody is told something often enough, it becomes what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you believe you're no good at exams, or you can't draw, you can't play a musical instrument, when you start practicing, when you go into a practice section, you're going to go into it with that thought in your mind. And guess what? You're not going to do very well. So the words that we say to ourselves are crucial. And all too often when you're going through life, you will have this thing called a gnat. No, I do not mean those annoying insects that fly around in the summer and bite you. These gnats are just as annoying and actually more of a problem, but they are negative, automatic thoughts. And an awful lot of what I do in these sessions is about helping you to change patterns of behaviour and patterns of thinking that don't help you. But the only way you will recognise that you have a negative thought pattern is if you practice mindfulness and you're really aware of your thoughts. Now, mindfulness sessions teach you two things. Number one, they teach you to practice being in the moment. But number two, every time I say, focus on your breathing or focus on the contact between your body and your chair, I'm opening your mind up to the idea that you can choose what you think about. And far too many people, I think, feel that there's a little puppet master controlling their thoughts, that things will always be this way because they've always been this way. So, if you've got this feeling that you fail at everything, that can't change. That's just you, and you will always think like that about yourself. And a lot of what I do is getting you to realise that not only can you change what you put your thoughts on, but actually you can get a different perspective on things. That you can actually start to change how you think about yourself. And trust me, you might not think it, you are your worst critic. You will be harder on yourself than you would ever allow yourself to be on somebody else. And interestingly, you will allow yourself to say things to and about you that if somebody else said them, you would walk away in anger or really upset. Why don't you get upset when you say these things to yourself? Because you have this distorted idea of what is true. Because that's the other thing. What the voice in your head tells you isn't necessarily true. We all know about disinformation on the internet. We all know about fake news, propaganda and spin and all these things that politicians use. Well, you've got this little voice in your head that uses exactly the same techniques. It'll put spin on things. It will put disinformation in there. And if you wouldn't put up with it on the internet, why are you going to put up with it just because it's you that's saying it? Doesn't make sense, does it? And if something doesn't make sense, then it's often worth trying to see if you can get a different perspective, maybe see things in a different way, and that can involve different choices of words. Now, if you've ever had cognitive behavioural therapy, you may very well recognise that this is at the core of cognitive behavioural therapy, which I know doesn't have a particularly good reputation. That's partly because of the way it's delivered. It doesn't mean the technique can't work, but very often the technique isn't delivered and taught in a way that works for you when you've been assigned a therapist. But in cognitive behavioural therapy, the core is you take a core belief about yourself and you try, when you find yourself thinking about it, you set up a different but believable phrase that is more positive. So I'm trying to think of a really good example. So if, say, you're studying for an exam and this little yammering voice in your head is telling you you're no good at exams and you're never going to pass it, how you might try rephrasing that is that you haven't passed this exam yet, but you're doing your best and there's no reason why you couldn't pass it in the future. It isn't always easy to see an automatic opposite to a gnat, a negative automatic thought. Sometimes it's just a case of reframing it and rewording it, though. Sorry, excuse me, my throat's really bad this afternoon actually. I'm a bit late doing this. So let's think of personal descriptions. I'm fat. That's one that I often get, because I do know I am not at my ideal weight. A good way of turning that round is, I'm curvy, I'm cuddly. Because curvy and cuddly have much more positive connotations than fat, which just sounds slob, lazy. And that can give you a whole different perspective on who you are. Did I really say who you are? Yes, I did. Because every single person has what we call their self-image. And this self-image defines absolutely everything about what you do. You will never ever act in a way that does not align with your self-image. Automatic behaviours will always align with your self-image. Whether it's, I can't give up smoking, I can't eat healthily, I can't run. If you've got that negative automatic thought, your behaviour will never go outside of that unless you're aware of the automatic thought. The good news is, well, there's two bits of good news. Number one, just as all that self-talk can be wrong, that means your self-image can be wrong. And the other good news is your self-image can be changed. Takes practice, and it means that you've got to play mind games with yourself. But you're already playing mind games with yourself with that negative nagging voice. So, why not change it so you've got a positive, helpful, supportive voice that's playing mind games? It's got to have a better outcome, hasn't it? So, you can alter your self-image with pictures and images that you imagine. It takes a lot of practice, but you can do it. It's, if you did any practice of setting an NLP anchor, it's kind of similar to that. So, if you're interested in finding your self-image and trying to alter it, I'd like to take you through a very short technique now. Now, this does involve you closing your eyes and doing a little bit of meditation. So if you can't do it right now because you're not in the right place, then just look out for my Namaste sign, which is the signal that I'm starting the actual technique. So if you need to pause the video or come back to the video later, please feel free. Just remember what I've said up till now. Namaste. Respect. I do this because I respect all of you, and I want you to respect yourself. But all too often that negative voice is anything but respectful. So what I'd like you to do is to close your eyes. Get yourself comfortable in your chair. Maybe shrug your shoulders and wriggle a bit further down. Get yourself comfortable and make sure you're not going to be disturbed. And then I want you to take a little time when I won't talk. And I want you to imagine the most magnificent version of you that you possibly can. This version of you is living the life you truly want, looks the way you truly want, acts and speaks and feels the way you truly want. So I want you, in a few minutes of silence, to really make a very clear image of who you are at your magnificent best, the most magnificent version of you that you can imagine. Well done. Now I'd like you to imagine that you are sitting in a cinema. And up on the screen, the film that is playing is starring this magnificent version of you going through the life you would like to lead. And as you watch from your seat, I'd like you to imagine that you float out of your seat and float in to the screen so that you are inhabiting the body of that magnificent you. And I really want to notice absolutely everything that you can see, hear, or feel as you become this most magnificent version of you. How are you dressed? What sort of work are you doing? How do you feel? What sort of things do you eat and drink? What sort of things do you enjoy doing in your spare time? Really notice absolutely everything about this magnificent you. I want you to really notice absolutely everything that you can see, hear and feel as this most magnificent version of you. Enjoy it. Really feel it. Really make sure all these images and feelings and this knowledge of being this magnificent you, really make sure you are truly taking it all in. And then I want you to go back to your cinema seat. The film ends. And then suddenly you're standing on a path. You are standing at one end of the path, and at the other end is that most magnificent version of you. How far away is it? How smooth does the path look between where you are now and where you want to get to? Are there any obstacles? And I'd like you to think about one small change that you can make today that you can practice every day from today, one small change in habit, one small change in thinking that will bring you a step closer to that magnificent you. And then bring yourself back to normal awareness. But I hope you can bring the awareness of that magnificent you into the here and now. So that you've got a feel for, okay, that's what it felt like. And what you're doing, you're reprogramming your subconscious. As with the NLP anchor, if you practice setting the NLP anchor every day, eventually it becomes automatic. You make the gesture and you get the feeling. This is the same. Every time you imagine that magnificent version of you, you start to shift your self-image. You start to shift your self-image from I can never get there to, oh, okay, some way to go, but I can get there. And one thing that puts people off making changes is because there are, it seems to be too big a task. And the other thing about mindfulness is it keeps you in the moment and you're only focusing on what you've got to do now. Now, in this moment, you can only make a small change. But make enough small changes and they add up to something big. I want you to think about a pyramid. The top of the pyramid is where you want to get to. It's described in one book as a huge, unbelievably great goal, a hug. But you don't start building a pyramid at the top. You start from the bottom with lots of little bricks. And what you can do by making these small changes, lay the foundations for you to slowly become that most magnificent version of you that you can imagine. Why is this positivity important? Because however much you want to change things, you won't make a change if all you know is, I don't like what I've got now. You have to know what you're changing to for anything to actually happen. So I hope that's given you something interesting to think about. Given you something to quieten that little gnat in your head that says you're hopeless, you can't do anything, blah, 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 blah. Because it's not true. I know it's not true and I want you to know it's not true. So, I hope you found this interesting. This has encompassed a little bit of hypnotherapy, a little bit of life coaching, a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of visualization. And if anything I've said, you've thought, I'd like to do a little bit more about that, but more personalised to me, then do please feel free to contact me. I'm very happy to arrange one-to-one appointments via video for the magnificent price of £1 UK or more if you can afford it, but only pay what you can afford. So feel free to contact me and we can get a video appointment set up.